I need to probably log back in, yeah. Works. Wonder if I should actually bring the actual webcam out. Oh, when I do this, the picture looks good, but when we zoom, the picture never looks good. It's probably what it is, but it's also probably the camera. Even when I upload these, it doesn't look good. But if I upload a normal video, it looks okay. I know. There we go. I know. You just have to love. I know. He loves you. Thank you for kisses. I have to talk to my students. I have a live stream. Why don't you go out, hang out with your mamas? Hello to the couple who jumped in. Good morning, Samantha. Give a couple minutes for whoever might be stopping in, then we'll get started chatting about things. But if you have any specific questions, throw them in the chat and I'll start with them. Good morning, Charlotte. And yeah, post your question in the chat. I'll get started with them in a couple minutes and then we're going to start chatting. Good morning, Michelle. This. Both should still follow general APA format, Michelle. So like double space, the right font, the right size, having a title page. If you do the original, I do require that you have one reference, so you'll still have a reference page. That one reference for you could be something about like a behavior or a reinforcer or punisher that you looked up. Like that's usually what makes the most sense. For example, if you were stopping cursing, you could look up the effectiveness of a swear jar. You could find research on. If you're doing smoking, you can do like a medical journal about the health benefits of quitting smoking. It's something that's research driven, but it could be about anything. So you'll still have a title page, still have a reference page. Um, that one reference should have an in-text citation. So it's still APA format, but it's not as research heavy for sure. So Shita, you're in my you're in, I forget which class, but what day do we meet, Sheeta? Are you in my Monday class or my Tuesday, Thursday? Thursday. Okay, just so you know, I'm technically talking with a different intro to psychology class, so it's a different assignment. So everyone else in this room, the Ishita's question won't apply to. But for Ishita, for your question, you can use three sources is fine. You need two sources. So it's two required, and the third is optional that you found. You should have three sources. The third is optional to include for that one. Michelle, I'm okay with either one. There are very small differences in the APA updates. The newest update gives you a couple of choices on like in-text citations. For example, you can now include the page number as well as the author and the year in an in-text citation. It, for the most part, just gives you a little more option and less limitation. So either one is fine. I'm not a stickler for APA format in Intro to Psychology. So to that, like as long as I see an attempt at it, I understand that for a lot of you, this is your first, second attempts at using APA format. So I'm not going to be a stickler for it. I'm a little bit more strict about it for upper level classes that I teach, but not for intro to psychology. As long as I can see you making an attempt, I'm more than happy. The big thing that I will look for is that your attempt is APA format and not you're just using like MLA format or something like that. But I'm not going to mark you down for one thing being out of place in a reference or something like that. All right, so keep putting any questions that you have in the chat. There's a couple of things that I know I want to just introduce that are coming up for this week for everybody. We'll answer the questions in chat as much about specific assignments as you all might need. And then towards the tail end of questions, there's a couple of just general things that I wanted to mention. They're kind of takeaways is how I would describe them for the class for Intro to Psychology that I like to lead my classes with. But we are getting to the wind down of the semester now. For this week, you have exam 3 that is due. Exam 3 should be submitted by Friday, end of day, anytime from by 11:59 p.m. My hope would be that you've taken a look at the module by now and taken a look at psychological disorders. So the exam is on this week's chapter, which is psychological disorders, last week's, which was personality, and then the final chapter is memory. Memory we covered a few weeks ago, though. So those 3 chapters are on the exam. The only assignment you have to submit to me is the exam, and that's the same as the previous ones. Just submit the exam answer key with the, that's completed with the letter answers. The content for the week is about psychological disorders, and I organized this slightly differently than the past couple of weeks, trying to make this work the best for you. So what you have in there, you still have a PowerPoint like always. You have my 10-minute lecture. This one's a little shorter than 10 minutes, and what I focused on for this one was more the introduction before you get to the specific disorders of like what the DSM is and how we diagnose and things like that. When it comes to the specific disorders, when you're going through the PowerPoint, load up the document that says disorder talking points. For a few, it's not for all the disorders by any means, but for a few of the disorders, there's like a paragraph of extra detail. And then finally, load up the document that says YouTube disorders list. I think it says. I have to check what I titled it exactly. And on that list, you're going to have not a video for every disorder, but you'll have 1 to 2 videos for every category of disorder, pretty much. And what I want you to do is look at those 3 documents together as you're going through everything. So as you get to a disorder, watch the video for the disorder. So as you get to depression, watch the video for depression, the first one. and then see if there's any talking points for depression as well. The talking points that I would have in that paragraph would be either things that I want you to pay attention to in the video, or some things that the video doesn't cover quite as comprehensively as like the textbook might. So you're going to kind of take a look at the flip talking point and use your own judgment if you should be reading through it before you watch the video for something to focus on, or after the video to kind of put everything together. And that hopefully will make you understand the disorders really well. I also try to create questions, or take, I should say, questions from my test bank for this exam that more or less come straight from those videos. Things that they're specifically talking about a symptom in the video, and that symptom that they're talking about was something that I have on the exam question. It's not every single question, but you should see a lot of those exam questions. The videos are going to make things a lot easier for. And that's this week. Next week, you have your paper to do. And there's the two options on the paper. I'm not going to talk about either one in tons of detail unless you have questions, but I do want to go into a quick moment for each one. If you are doing the one that we had at the beginning of the semester, you had to run the experiment for 3 weeks. So if you haven't run the experiment, you have to do at this point the second option. But if you run your experiment, if you were able to run your experiment with the lockdown and with the virus going on, by all means, if you had done everything that you needed to, that's the one to write up. If you haven't done that, if you haven't done your 3 weeks of your observation week and 2 weeks of the experiment, if you haven't been reasonably able to do that because you're locked down and the behavior that you were choosing was something like speeding or something like that, that you're really just not driving a car right now, well, then you should go to the second option. But if you're doing the first option, when you write that paper up, it's 3 sections. Section 1 is the beforehand, section 2 is the experiment, section 3 is the aftermath. In the beforehand section, for the most part, is everything that would have been in your proposal. That is information about what your behavior is, what your reinforcers are, what your punishers are, what your goal is, and detail about the why for all of them. So why did you choose the behavior? Why is that reinforcement going to be reinforcing, punishment going to be punishing? Why is that goal going to work for you? Then you get to the experiment, and all I need to see for the experiment section of that paper is the data. You can provide me the data of your experiment as a graph, as a list, or in paragraph form, or as a chart or a table or something if you want as well. As long as I see the data, you're going to get credit for it. Because I give you so much freedom about how you include the data, I count it as one of the pages towards the requirements, no matter how you do it. So if you give me a 2-page list, it'll count as 1 page. If you give me a half of a page chart that fits everything, it'll still count as a page. And the third experiment is the aftermath. The aftermath is once your experiment is done, what is happening? What's the aftermath of this experiment? Did your experiment work? Why not? Where does it go from here? Are you going to keep doing reinforcements and punishments after the experiment's done? If you're not, and most of you probably wouldn't be, what do you think is going to happen? Is your behavior going to rubber band back to normal? Is it going to slowly go back to normal? Is it going to stay changed? So where does it go from here? And then also, what could you have done better? What could you have done differently to make this work? Now, the last 2 questions actually are really important, because if your experiment did work, if your answer to that first question was yes, it worked, you should have a lot of detail for where does it go from here. You should still mention what you could have done better, because everything can be improved upon, but just maybe a couple sentences there. But if your experiment did not work, well, you already know where it goes from here. The behavior never changed. So you should still mention that and have a sentence or 2, but you should have a lot of information about what you could have done better there. So if you're doing that paper option, between the beforehand and the aftermath, you have 3 pages. Your experiment is 1 page. That's how you get to your page requirement. If you're doing the second paper option, it's a traditional research paper. So it's a 4-page paper that you are going to, I forget off the top of my head how many sources you needed. I want to say it was 3, but it might have been 4, 5. Let me check really quick. You have 3 sources. for your paper. It's a 4-page paper, 3 sources, and it very much is a traditional research paper. You're going into those sources in detail, breaking down the information about whatever disorder that you chose. A couple of you emailed me saying, "Hey, is this disorder okay?" And I said yes to every email I believe that I got. If you're really not sure, you can always email me. But I'm okay with any disorder that you were writing about, so long as you can find current research on it, which is the vast majority of disorders. I mean, it's anything pretty much in the DSM. So whatever disorder you would choose, find 3 academic sources. Those sources should ideally be from the last 5 years. They should be academic sources, scholarly journal articles. Um, if you have to go further than 5 years, that's okay. But for the most part, try to get it within 5 years, and at least have 2 of the 3 articles that you're finding within the last 5 years. And beyond that, it's a traditional research paper. It's going into what the research says. I'm looking to see that you found good research, that you understood the research, so on and so forth. And then the last section of it is the one that I focus on when I talk about it, because it's the section that sometimes students forget, because it's a little different than a traditional research paper. Is I want you to include a section on everyday life and living. So basically, what is life like for someone who has that disorder? What is, for most of the disorders you're going to choose, what is everyday life about? But for a few disorders, what is life like when they are afflicted by their disorders? So paranoid schizophrenia, you might talk more about what is their life like when they are suffering from a hallucination and delusion. Um, Use your own judgment for that, but I do want a section on everyday life and living. Make sure that's not just a short paragraph. Have a page of your 4 pages about that. Oh, did I not spell it right? Sorry about that. 49 and 50, I created those questions myself. So those aren't actually coming from a test bank. So I might have just had a typo on it. I'll make a note, Charlotte, so that way I can fix it in the future. Um, so apologies if there is a typo on that. That would be completely off of completely my fault. Um, that is it for me. The papers are due next week, and that's how we finish up for the semester. I'll still hold my live stream for next week for any questions that we have last minute or just chatting about things. Um, I will definitely make a note. Oh, I see. I put the E, and I shouldn't have put an E in Santa Claus. Okay, that's actually I don't think I realized that there wasn't an E in Santa Claus, to be honest. Uh, when it comes to final papers, Samantha, I never put a limit. I will read as much as you want to write about. Um, you could write me a 10-page paper if you want. I It's like 1 out of every, I'd say, 300 students that I have that give me like a 10-page paper for it. So I don't expect it to be anyone in the class, but I'll read as much as you want to write about. I don't like limiting you on a final paper. Response papers in a class, like if you take a different class with me, yeah, response paper that's 2 to 3 pages. All right, I want it to be 2 to 3 pages, but final papers, I never have a problem with it. That's Don't worry about it. If you have a big research paper, that's totally fine with me. Um, that's it for what I directly have to talk about. Like I said, I'm still gonna have my live stream next week for any questions that we have about the papers, any last minute about the semester questions that we have. If there's questions about life with the virus and things like that. The thing that I've been saying when it comes to that is we now are getting to the point where we're going to see the psychological effects of our quarantine. So the things that we learned in this class might be very relevant in the next few weeks for sure. Um, this week's chapter, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to psychological disorders, as a lot of people are going to be suffering from higher levels of anxiety, stress, uh, mood swings, and at greater risk for depressive episodes and things like that, um, as well as a lot of the social psychology stuff that we talked about when it comes to the power of the environment. You're going to be seeing a lot of that stuff in the next few weeks as the environment that the world is creating right now, well, it has effects on people. So a lot of that kind of stuff we could talk about. I do have a couple of things that I want to talk about takeaways, but I want to see if anyone has any questions in the next minute, and then I'll chat really quick about those takeaways. But once I get started, I need to like finish my point before I get to a question. All right. Well, it doesn't seem like anything jumped right up into the question log. If something does in the first minute or two of me talking, I can always stop and answer it. But otherwise, I'll get to the question after I finish. There's two big points that I like to make as we start to finish things up for this semester. I have two takeaways that I like to give for the class. Um, the second one is the really big one to me. But I want to start with the one that I basically was talking about last week. And that is when it comes to therapy and counseling. Well, the first point of last week was that everyone can benefit from talking to someone, from getting unconditional positive regard from someone. We all need that positive regard. The thing is, we need to meet people's conditions to get it, even from our parents. When we were younger, we got positive regard unconditionally from our parents, but most of us probably not right now. Most of us probably have to meet our conditions from our parents. We've gotten to a point where if we didn't do well in a class, we fail a class, our parent will probably say it was our fault. They're not going to give us positive regard unconditionally. The only relationship that by definition gives unconditional positive regard in the world currently is with a counselor or a therapist. But it doesn't mean that we can't give unconditional positive regard to our friends, to our family. And that's my first takeaway that I have for this is we like to think that we are there for people. And what I mean by that is we probably, and most of you in this chat have probably said to someone you care about, hey, I'm always here for you if you need to talk. And I'm not saying you don't mean it, you do mean it. But reverse that really quickly because someone probably has said that same thing to you before. Hey, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. And what do you think? You may, if you're like some of my experiences of what I see happening, you may hear that I'm here for you if you need to talk, and you say, wow, that's really nice. You like that someone says that to you, but you don't take it seriously. In that, yeah, you might talk to them about something important, but you're not going to talk to them about the deep things bothering you, the things that you would need unconditional positive regard for. We can talk to people about those things, but just saying I'm here for you isn't usually enough. To talk about those things with other people, well, we would need a little bit more. So the big point that I have for the first takeaway of this class is that, well, when is that more? Well, if you could think of a time where someone was desperate for it, that's usually the time that we as human beings give unconditional positive regard for free. If you realize that your friend really needs unconditional positive regard right now, you'll give it to them. You care about them. They're your friend. So if your friend came to you and they are in tears, they are a wreck because they just got dumped. Well, what do we say? We do things that are all unconditional positive regard. We say, it's their loss, not yours. You're going to find someone better in no time at all. It's going to be okay. And we might be thinking that, but we might not be. You could be thinking, of course they dumped you. You cheated on them, you dumb bitch. The point being, even if that's not what we're thinking, we recognize that our friend needs it right now, and we give them unconditional positive regard. But the thing is, and this is the $1,000,000 point of the first takeaway I have for you, is we only do that naturally when someone is desperate for it, when someone needs it. We don't do it just in day to day, every day, just talking with our friend. They have to meet our conditions like everyone else. But we're capable of giving unconditional positive regard. The big takeaway that I have for you for the first thing is we just have to schedule it. Saying I'm here for you if you ever need to talk is usually not enough. If you schedule and you say, hey, every Wednesday we're going to have dinner together and we're going to talk about the things really bothering us, well, you're capable of doing that. And you could just say things like that when you really do need to talk. You don't have to do that once a week. But if you don't schedule that, it just won't happen. So my first recommendation is always benefits people to talk about the things that really bother them. And to that point, schedule it with the people that you want to talk about those things with, because they can talk about the things that are really bothering them to you, and you could talk about them to them. And the second big takeaway that I have, and this one is the one that's, I would say nearest and dearest to my heart. The way I actually would describe this, if I ever write a book, it's going to be on this thing because I think this is just such a true thing that I've learned throughout my uh, about 15 years now of studying psychology. And it's such a simple thing that becomes so profound, I think, when you really start to think about it. But it's a very simple statement at the beginning. No one is as happy as you think that they are. And when you really start to continue that and break it down, hopefully you could see some of the same learnings that I have. But this is the thing I think psychology opened my eyes to more than anything. We naturally compare ourselves to other people. I have no doubt that everyone in this classroom has compared themselves to some of their friends, some of their family members, some other people that you might have been in school with. We compare ourselves to other people, but here's the continuation there. When we compare ourselves to other people, we naturally will find some things, some qualities that they may have that we wish that we had. The bottom line is if I had that quality, I would be happier. But so we take a continuation here, and this continuation is the important point because this continuation doesn't logically make sense. We look at this, you have a quality that I wish that I had, and it would make me happier if I had it. That all's true. But then we continue that by saying, because you have it, you must be happy. And that part doesn't make logical sense. Yes, it would make me happy if I had that quality. But just because you have it doesn't mean that you're happy that you have it. There's other things that you might still be missing. It is very, very possible that that person that you're looking at and you are saying, well, I wish I had that quality, I would be really happy. They might be looking at you, seeing a quality that you have that they don't have. And if they had that quality that you have, they would be happy, so they think that you're happy. So it is very possible, as we put each other on a pedestal, it is very possible to actually be jealous of the same person that is jealous of us, or in some way envious. Maybe jealousy wasn't the right adjective there. The bottom line is, we are all unique. What makes me happy doesn't have to make someone else happy. And even going one step further, and without really over disclosing my own personal story that made me realize this, it's very possible that we might take that quality that we have for granted. So, without over disclosing my story of this, I had a friend that this was my wake up call for, and it turns out that they had a quality that I wish that I had. And then as we started to talk about it and to open up about it, and this is years after we were friends, this is one of my best friends from high school, that this was after graduation from college that we really started talking about this. Realized that that person was jealous of me because I was smart. But the bottom line is I always took my intellect. It's not that big of a part of how I define myself. I wish I had the qualities that he had that I didn't. Well, he wished he had the intelligence that I had, that I never really stopped and thought about it, that it was this important big thing. Turns out the reason that we competed with each other, and we competed with each other all the time over everything, we were so needlessly competitive with one another. It turns out that the reason behind this is that we were both envious of what the other person had in their actual disposition, in their actual strengths. Every person in this world, strong at things and weak at things. Just because we have a weakness that someone else has as a strength doesn't mean that they have to be happy because they have that, because they are weak in things as well. And they might be weak at something that we are strong at. And that's the short version of the two big takeaways that I have. So the way I summarize that, the way I introduce that, is always that no one is as happy as you think they are. We look at people that have the qualities that we wish we had and we think it makes them happy. but they're missing other qualities. We can't compare, we can't use them and put them in our shoes. Their shoes fit differently. No, I hope those things help for those of you who are here listening. I hope those are some nice takeaways that maybe can kind of help you with your own outlook and just looking at psychology in general. Those are the two big things I like to leave everyone with. Beyond that, the rest of the hour here is answering whatever questions that you all might have. So if you do still have some questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, you guys can head on out, get me that exam in by Friday end of day, work on those papers. If you have questions, you can email me about them, but I will have a live stream next week as well, talking about them, answering any questions. If people don't have questions, it could be one that you just don't show up for. So this could be the last time that we are chatting with each other in person, or in person, I should say. And yeah, that's basically it for me. Just post whatever questions you have. If you have any questions about anything, if there's anything you want to chat about, and otherwise, if you don't have any questions, head on out. Have a good weekend. Get that exam into me, and email me if you have any questions. I know that there's only three of us in the chat here right now anymore still, but one thing I will also add that I should have thought to add earlier is, thank you guys for bearing with me as the semester did turn online, as there was obviously a lot of chaos in figuring out everything, especially for this class using Blackboard. We had a big technology issue last week with it, and Blackboard has been a little overwhelming for some of us. Don't use this as a reason to be afraid of an online class in the future. As long as you're able to use Blackboard, there's no reason, I think, to be scared off of an online class. This was not designed to be an online class. When this went online, we were a face-to-face class that transitioned to doing things online. When I teach an online class, there was a lot of things in common with this for sure, but this was chaotic. Every week felt different because of how our transition worked. If you're taking an online class, if you take one over the summer, for example, and if I end up teaching one over the summer and you took a class with me over the summer, the thing about an online class is, while the content of every week is different, what you're doing should feel pretty consistent every week. You'll be doing, a discussion board post like what we did for 2 of the weeks, pretty much every single week. You should have a lot more consistency than having to decide, all right, is this week going to be a discussion board, an essay, or an exam? And every week is so different. Thank you very much, Kasha. A very big part of what happened for us this week was for what happened for us this semester was just trying to not be perfect, but to get what we could across under the circumstances. And I think that this will end up scaring off a lot of people from taking an online class over the summer, as we're 100% online. And I hope that for those of you who would take a class over the summer, you still are willing to take one. The only really reason that I would say maybe to wait until we're back, hopefully in person in the fall, is if you were never able to really understand Blackboard, because that part you do. No matter what, an online class is going to have to use Blackboard. But there's a lot of things that an online class can do that we might not have necessarily done. There's some other websites that can help with certain things. There's websites that I use for when I have more heavy group work than just that group discussion assignment that we ended up doing. There's websites that we can use for presentations and things like that. For the most part, I just kept things to sign on to YouTube and use what is there for you on Blackboard. I tried to simplify the technology demands, because I knew that for some of you, Blackboard would probably be a little challenging. Carly, let me actually check before I give you. I believe I have it due at the end of next week, but let me confirm that. May 6th, Wednesday of next week. The final paper will be due. And we will see if there's a lot of questions that come up in the live stream that I realize that people didn't understand something important. I can always extend it a day, but as of right now, it'll be due on Wednesday, and I will still have my live stream on Wednesday, but that might end up a the last minute, so maybe I'll extend it a day. So I know what happened with I had a typo in there, and did I change it to 3? I have on the syllabus as 4 for the research paper. Did I say, Carly, that I would do it as 3? Because I know when I made the changes, I know I had one that said 3 and one that said 4 on the changes. So I'll go with whatever I said. If I said 3, then we'll make it 3. That typo was on me, so I will say that we will go with the lower of the two, and we'll make it that it's 3 minimum. Just make sure at that point that it's 3 full pages, not just a little bit onto the 3rd page. That was in my haste of trying to get all the changes up as quick. I didn't realize that I had a page length in 2 separate places on that assignment, and I only changed one of them. So that was completely on my mistake. So that I think that sounds fair. Like I said, wasn't trying to be perfect as I spill a little coffee. I was not trying to be perfect this semester, and I don't think any of your professors were. We actually had when everything was happening, we made sure to, in our big meeting of how we wanted to do everything, to emphasize that point. It was impossible to be perfect with everything that happened. I think that's universal. So everything was rushed. I was trying to get as much as I could available to everyone. Questions were, emails were so much higher because everyone was confused about everything. So there was certainly going to be a couple of mistakes that were made. So I apologize for making it, and we'll switch it so that it's in your favor, and we'll make it 3. And I'm just going to grab a paper towel really quick because I spilled a little coffee on the floor. All right, so let me know what other questions you guys might have. Oh, you're very welcome, Carly. And obviously, no one could have anticipated the chaos that we ended up under. So I'm happy that you still were able to take something out of the class. If that is in fact true, that's amazing. Because right now, this is definitely a semester that's going to stick out in my mind for wow. I hope that students learned anything from everything that was going on with how crazy things got. So I'm very happy if you can look at everything that happened and say, all right, we did the best that we could. That means that I can give myself a little pat on the back. I really should also add thank you all for keeping up with everything on Blackboard, dealing with the changes um, that did come. I know that wasn't easy for so many of you. Um, Kasha, what PowerPoint paper? I don't understand what that is. Do you mean for the original paper assignment? Do you mean the data for the experiment? Then yes, however you want to include the data, if you're doing that, is totally fine. You could do it if you want to do it as like a PowerPoint. That's okay. Um, you can do it in Microsoft Word. You can do it as a PowerPoint. You can kind of create a table and then just copy and paste that table into Microsoft Word. Any way that you want to do it is fine. I definitely need you to include it. If you're doing it as a separate file, Blackboard, I think, will only allow you to attach one file to your submission. If that does end up the case and you can't like attach it to the same file, just email me your paper and your PowerPoint then. If it won't work on Blackboard, email it to me and I'll grade you from the email. I don't believe Blackboard ever fixed that feature, that one assignment could have two different file format types. But it might have. If it did, then just attach it right to the assignment. It probably will be easier for you to just email it to me, honestly, Kasha. So that's what I would say to do. What is open on my computer that's getting hot from this? Yeah, that's totally fine. I was going to say I thought you emailed me the last paper. Works with me. As long as I get it, I'm happy. Do you have any other questions for me? Excellent. Make sure you get the exam into me by Friday end of day and have a great weekend. I'm going to hang out for a couple more minutes in case anybody else pops in with any questions. But assuming that I don't get any questions in the last few minutes, I'm going to end the stream probably in like 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm actually looking forward to this weekend. Not because I have anything to do, because I don't think much any of us have much anything to do. I'm just hoping that the weather warms up. I think I'm in a really good mood because yesterday was very warm. Hi, Bob. Hi. I think I can end the stream from here. I'm the only one in the chat.